So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is... Thanks. See, I told Norm I didn't think this would work, and I was right. I wonder if... Yeah, oh no. Yeah, maybe you better hold it. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Set it on the ground. Set it on the floor.
Oh, yeah, how about in front? Yeah, oh, that's a good way. Sorry, John.
That's all right, you're all right.
That'll do. That'll do. Is that all right if I had some technical difficulties?
I can cut it out.
You can cut it out, good. He can edit it, right. So it will get edited, and that's good. Because I want to tell you about my research project. I already said my name is Carolyn Ludwig, and I've been in the Civil War Heritage Foundation with Mary and everybody since 2004 maybe. And I've always been in love with Tillie Pierce of Gettysburg, or Mrs. Matilda Pierce Allman. And so over the years, I felt a connection to her because she lived her adult life in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania, which is only 40 miles from my home. And I visit Selinsgrove for different things, and Susquehanna University is there. So I've always had a connection with Tillie because I had visited the church where she and her husband have their markers, and you know, that it's always been someone that I'm fascinated about, and I always want to know more about her. And just when I think, well, there's still a lot to learn. I still have a lot to learn about her. I came up with this plan for my project to go back and look at all the books that Tillie might have read throughout her lifetime. Because she mentions in her book that when she left Gettysburg, day one of the battle, with the Shrivers, Henrietta and her two children that lived next door up here on Baltimore Street. When she left that day, they had been at her school, which is up on High Street at the corner of Washington and High. They had been there doing literary exercises. And I thought, oh, well, I wonder what school curriculum they had, you know. And no one seems to know that they had a school curriculum, but they definitely did a lot of literary work in their school, and of course we know that they read books. That's, you know, that's what they had access to, not necessarily that they bought them. But as my project evolved, I started looking at publication dates of books and books that she might have read, and I went online to some people. Unfortunately, I found out that Tillie has a website, Facebook page rather. Tillie has a Facebook page. I thought Carol would appreciate that. But, you know, I wasn't all thrilled about that, but I don't know how that might have come up by the book that I left over in the room. It's a recent book written by Tanya Anderson, and she does a really nice job, and it's more geared toward children. So I did start communicating with Tanya Anderson. I wish she would come today. She said she might be around this weekend, because now her book's in paperback as well. And so Tanya Anderson said I had her permission to talk about what we talked about. We talked about the books that Tillie might have read in her lifetime, basically from 1860s through 1889 was the year that Tillie Pierce's book was published. That's when my own book was published. Right here it is. And you know, in all those years, we know that she read a lot of books. So Tanya Anderson helped me find what books might have been on the list. So we started a little book list. And then at the same time, I decided, I got a little bit sidetracked because I love to take walks. And I decided to add a little bit of Take a Walk with Tillie, so that when I do the presentation for students at a school, for example, and I'll be doing it at the Tabor Museum, our historical society back in Williamsport, and just to encourage them, because I did it at the Catholic high school this year, but it was about taking walks to all the places that Tillie went, from her home or from her school. Take a Walk with Tillie. And so Tanya Anderson kind of uses that in her book, because kids can have GPSs on their phones now, and they can look up all these. So if they're not interested in reading the books that she read, which adults might be interested in, at least they might be interested in coming and taking all the walks that she did. For example, she always walked to Spangler Springs, because she mentions that in her book, that the walks that she would take to Spangler Springs, which was actually two springs at the time. So I found an old picture of Spangler Spring, what it looked like. And of course, the walk to the Evergreen Cemetery and how they went through this Evergreen Cemetery on the first day of the battle, how they walked through the cemetery and got on Tawnytown Road, stopped at Lydia Leicester's house where they were offered a ride in a wagon the rest of the way to the Jacob Weichert farm. So I included that. I have a map of the location of the homes of her friends and location of her school, location of that trip that infamous trip that they made on July 1st to the Jacob Weichert farm where they stayed for 7 days to help care for the wounded and dying soldiers. And, you know, basically, as you can see, it got a little busy. So I just got into it, and I'm not done with it now. I plan to expand it, work on it a little bit more. The book thing alone was fascinating to look at the stories of the authors. For example, Mary Shelley was an 18-year-old girl that wrote this book, and it was published in 1813. So we were wondering if Tillie read Frankenstein. Well, we don't know, but we think she might have, because the story of the author is kind of similar to her story. It was written by a young girl. This was interesting because this is just a collection of all Civil War poems, and it talks about a lot of the authors that wrote the poems during the Civil War. I picked this up because I just love it, but it's Lincoln's Daily Devotionals. I don't think she read that. But I do know that we're sure she read The Scarlet Letter. And I bet a lot of you read that as well, right? So we're not sure about some of the Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice. Nathaniel Hawthorne, definitely she read Nathaniel Hawthorne. And definitely, even according to the feature article in one of our Civil War historian, the Citizen's Companion magazines, even this one has an article about what they were reading in 1863. And they were reading Henry David Thoreau. And what I love about all of the books is it has all of the stories of the authors that wrote them. And I read those as much as I tried to read some of the books, because obviously I wanted to use this website that has sort of like a cliff notes on some of these books. But it's good. It's good to have this information, and it's good to have more to work on, because literary works are described in this magazine as well. So I thought, well, I'd have this stuff out for people to look at, and they could check out all the books throughout the years. And one that we're sure she would have wanted to read, because as Tanya Anderson said, she was a good Methodist woman, even though her gravesite is at the Trinity Lutheran Church, but you know how that goes along the way churches change a little. But we're sure she would have read Ben-Hur. Does anyone know who wrote Ben-Hur? I bet Ed knows. Do you know who wrote Ben-Hur, right?
I know it's someone who was in the Civil War in a significant position, and I'm not able at the moment to put it up, but I know somebody has his hand up.
You knew it. Norm, who wrote it?
General Lew Wallace.
General Lew Wallace. General Lew Wallace. General Lew Wallace wrote Ben-Hur. We love the movie, that's for sure. And so we're quite sure she read Ben-Hur in the 1880s. This was published the same year that her book was published. And we know she read Louisa May Alcott. And I don't have Joe's Boys, but that would have been one that she would have read after Little Women. So Louisa May Alcott is on the list. And this one we're not sure of, but Stephen Crane's story is really interesting on the Red Badge of Courage. So that was another good one. We're not sure about Uncle Tom's Cabin, but maybe, you know, we just have it there because then, you know, some people might want to check it out. This is always good. And this, of course, you Confederate people would appreciate this, and everybody appreciates this. This is a wonderful diary of Mary Chestnut, and I kind of doubt that Tillie bothered with that. I don't know, what do you think?
Interesting person.
I know, but she is an interesting person. So the books kind of go on, and this is another good little one that I picked up along the way over the years. Obviously, I have about 100 more at home, and it has all the stories of the authors. as I mentioned before, that's what I love the most. To hear what age they were, what they did, and
What's the name of that book?
and this is just a compilation of short stories that were written by Civil War women at the time. Louisa May Alcott, Edith Wharton, Rose Terry Cook, and other writers. So these were all female writers during the Civil War time. So it's a nice book, and there's a companion book that started out first. This was the second one. So I think I left that back in the room. Heaven knows my room is packed with stuff, and I have yours to return, the Citizen's Companion. So it's just it's a wonderful thing to do the research. So I'm trying to get kids interested in doing it. And I actually did interest one little girl who came to my one presentation with her mother and had read Tillie's book. And you know, it wasn't actually supposed to be a children's book in a way, but children love to read it. It's quite good for them to read. There are some words in the book that we have to look up, you know, as they have to look up too. And the one word was, Tillie became inured to the situation. I-N-U-R-E-D. Do you know that word? It is in the dictionary. When she became inured to the, it means she became numb. You know, we would say, how did she withstand all of those days and nights with the dead and dying soldiers? And she was with Stephen Weed when he died, General Weed. She came back to see him the next morning, as a matter of fact, and he had died. And how did, as a 15-year-old girl, how did she withstand all of those things? And that word inured came up. She said she was inured to her circumstances. So it means she just became numb to it. And children are so resilient, and they can just, you know, bounce back from it. And so the stuff about Tillie goes on and on. So I would say, I already sold 2 copies of her book today, but I don't know. We're gonna have to find out if we can pay for our car now. Just
A lot of books.
I know, they're gonna have to sell a lot of books. But no, we don't know. This book continues to be published. This one I bought at the Shriver Museum a couple of weeks ago, because now, obviously, you can take Tillie's book and do whatever you want with it. Even our wonderful friend that wrote the Road to Gettysburg, your friend from over Wrightsville Way,
Scott Mingus.
Scott Mingus uses a lot of Tillie's stuff in his book, and his book is wonderful. And so at Gettysburg, or What a Girl Saw in Her the Battle, right? Her book, it continues to be published, originally published in 1888/89. There's always a little bit of controversy about that. But it was published when she lived in Selinsgrove. She donated all of the proceeds. 2 claims on that. She donated them to the veterans because she was in GAR and DAR, or she donated all of the proceeds to the victims of the fire in the Selinsgrove town that took place a couple years before her book was published. So whatever, she didn't write the book for any monetary gains at all, and she just wrote it because she kept getting encouraged by friends to write down her memoirs. Write these things down. Did you keep a diary? She said no, she didn't keep a diary. She had some artifacts, but she didn't really keep a diary of her experiences. They were just so, you know, strong in her memory that she could just start writing them down. And then even today, she gets credit for having one of the most accurate accounts from a civilian about the battle. So it all comes back together, and it all continues, and so I thank you for your time to listen about it.